Hey friend, welcome back to the Special Kind of Motherhood podcast. As busy moms, we all know how hard it can be to make healthy meals on a budget, especially whenever the good food feels so expensive. But what if I told you it's totally possible to eat well without breaking the bank? Stay tuned because today we're sharing some simple, budget-friendly tips to help you feed your family nutritious meals without the extra cost. Are you ready to make healthier eating easier and more affordable for your family? Let's get started. Hey friend, welcome to the Special Kind of Motherhood podcast. If you're a busy mom looking for easy ways to live healthier, feel better, and take care of your family, you're in the right place. We are here to make healthy living easy so you can feel your best while caring for those you love the most. Let's dive in. As busy moms trying to balance the demands of family life, maybe homeschooling, if you work, and just everything else that we have going on, you might find that healthy eating can be, just a bit tricky. It is really easy to feel overwhelmed when it comes to making nutritious meals for yourself and for your family, especially whenever healthy foods often come with a hefty price tag. But here's the good news. You don't have to break the bank to feed your family well. In today's episode, we're going to dive into some simple, budget-friendly strategies that will help you get more nutrients on your plate without spending a fortune. Whether you're short on time, you're battling food habits, or you're just struggling to fit healthy eating into your busy routine, I've got you covered with some practical tips that can make a real difference. And this is actually going to be a 2-part episode. So we're going to have part 1 this week, and then part 2 will release next week. So let's jump right in. Number 1 is going to be to prioritize nutrients. So eating healthy doesn't have to break the bank, like I've said before. When it comes to meal planning on a budget, it's all about prioritizing nutrients. Yes, cheap, calorie-dense foods might fill you up, so I'm thinking like empty carbs, white pasta, any kind of like desserts, cupcakes, anything like that that has just more of a very low calorie, low nutrition, but tends to be a little bit cheaper. They might fill you up, but they can also leave you lacking in the nutrients that your body is going to need to stay healthy long term. So nutrient-rich foods might cost a little bit more up front, but they are actually going to keep you full and satisfied for a longer period of time, and they're also going to help to protect your health. So what should you focus on? Make sure that your meals are including a balance of macronutrients, which are proteins, fats, and carbs. And we're wanting to look for the carbs. We're especially looking for, my preference is like a whole food source for carbs, or at best, or if you have kids who aren't necessarily interested in the things such as sweet potatoes, any type of other potato, like a brown rice, things like that. You could also look for like a whole grain based at minimum. Sourdough is a great option, especially if you're getting a good quality organic flour and then you're allowing a long ferment for the sourdough. That can be a much healthier option for yourself and for your kids if you can tolerate gluten. That can be something that can be really beneficial. We also want to focus on micronutrients such as vitamins and minerals. So by aiming for a balance of these nutrients at each meal, you're going to be able to nourish your body without going over budget. Something that I really like to do for my kids who are picky eaters, because we struggle so much with protein, and what I have found for myself is in a meal, if I have an adequate amount of protein, which for myself personally, I aim for 30 grams of protein per meal. I don't aim for that much for my kids, of course, because they need less, and then an adequate amount of a healthy fat. So grass-fed butter, olive oil, avocado oil, an avocado, things like that. I will typically feel fuller longer, and I also tend to have less temptation around foods whenever I am making sure that I have an adequate amount of protein and fat. So I do eat carbs, although I try to do a whole food source, and then I will kind of adjust when I eat them based on my cycle. But for my kids, we struggle with protein, and so what I typically will do with them is try to find ways to get protein into their diet. My kids are pretty good about eating vegetables and fruit. They especially love fruit, which of course is another great source depending on the fruit. It's a great source of a carb as well. So I even will give them protein powder. I'll make them like a protein milk in order to get extra protein into their diet. And what I have found is that overall, it just tends to help all of us to feel our best, and everyone tends to be in a lot better mood because we're keeping stabilized blood sugar by making sure that we are getting that adequate amounts of fat and protein. Now for you, this may be completely different. Maybe you have a child who is great with protein, but you really need to find out ways to increase their vegetables or their healthy carbs. You need to switch out some unhealthy carbs for some healthier carb options. It is just a good idea to try to focus, if you can really just narrow it down to looking at the meal and deciding, okay, where is a healthy source of protein here? Where is a healthy source of fats? And where is a healthy source of carbohydrates? And if we can really focus on more of like whole food options for this, then a lot of times those micronutrients of vitamins and minerals are going to be provided in those whole food sources as well, which is very helpful. I think it's a great way to really simplify and not get kind of overwhelmed and stuck in feeling like it's too much, or feeling like it's too much to manage, or it's hard to understand. Just narrow it down to, do we have a good healthy source of protein, carb, and fat in each meal? And then if you do, you can feel like, okay, I'm giving myself and my family a good nutritious meal. Okay, number 2, make the most of your meals. So when you are trying to eat healthy meals on a budget, one of the easiest ways to save money is by making most of your meals from scratch. Buying ready to eat or prepackaged foods can really be convenient, but it's also typically a lot more expensive than buying the whole ingredients that you can prep yourself and make yourself. And the good news is that prepping meals at home doesn't have to take hours. With a little bit of planning, you can make simple, nutritious dishes that are going to feed your family for days without spending a ton of time in the kitchen. Plus, you're going to have a ton of control over what is going into your food. You're going to know what kind of quality of food you're getting. You're not going to have to be wondering about any kind of additives or crazy ingredients, or reading this ingredient list that's so long and half of the ingredients you don't even understand what it is, which is going to be really good for your health and also for your wallet, because you're really minimizing and simplifying the ingredients that you're having to keep in your home, and also saving money by not buying the prepackaged, pre-made things. And again, this can fall back to the same thing whenever we're talking about making the most of your meals, is simplify. Keep it simple. Focus on those good sources of fruits, vegetables. Focus on getting enough fat. Focus on getting enough protein. And then add in a healthy carb. Keep it just super simple, super basic. And I think if we can really just make that mindset shift of keeping it simple, while yes, we might have to spend a little bit more money up front for the ingredients, in the long run, we are going to save over time, as long as we can be really smart with how we buy. And I'm not even saying that there aren't times whenever it's going to be more expensive to eat healthier, because depending on what you buy, it can be more expensive. But we also have to weigh that against the cost of our health. And do we feel better when we eat healthier? For instance, for myself, I feel better whenever I don't eat gluten. So while it may be a little bit more expensive for me to do that, it is worth it for me, the trade-off, in order to feel better and just have that sense of being healthier. So the next time you're at the store, just think about how you can make the most out of the ingredients that you have in your home instead of buying the prepared stuff. And when it comes to this, as in all things, I recommend starting small, starting slow. So start with one thing that you want to switch out. Maybe you want to find a healthier bread option for your kids. Start with that specifically. I would not try to switch out everything at once. Try to make sure you're switching it all out one at a time. That way, this is something that's slow that you can actually stick with over time. Okay, number 3 is going to be to prep your meals. One of the easiest ways to save money on food is by prepping your meals. While grabbing ready-to-eat foods or hitting up the drive-thru is tempting, especially if it's 5 o'clock and you're hangry and you have no idea what you have at home for food, then that's whenever it's more likely you're going to give into that temptation. It's also going to be significantly more expensive than buying those whole ingredients and cooking them yourself, like we've talked about in the last point. A little bit of extra time in the kitchen can really pay off, both in your budget and also in your health. Plus, it's going to help you resist the impulse for takeout. And I don't know about you, but we have periods where we will get really busy and we will eat out more than we would want to. And then we have times where we don't hardly eat out at all. And I was actually thinking about this last week. We really haven't eaten out much at all lately. And I think a lot of that is because whenever I know what we have already in the kitchen, like in our freezers, in our pantry, and I kind of have an idea of the things that we can cook, then the urge to get takeout, it's easier to overcome that whenever it comes, just because I think, well, we have stuff at home and I don't really want to spend the money, or I know we'll feel better if we eat this. So it really does make such a difference. And one of the things that I realized, which I'm going to touch on this as well, is that I have started throwing stuff in the freezer Like if I make extra of it, or let's say we had leftovers that didn't get eaten, so we had like some extra meat, some extra ground beef, whatever, then I will just throw it in smaller serving sizes in the freezer. And I have found that that has been helpful as well, to kind of know that we have those quick things there ready to go. And on top of that, the other thing I've noticed is making extras whenever I cook a meal so that we have plenty of leftovers. And then making sure, like I said, that those don't get wasted by freezing what I can if we don't get through the leftovers in time before they go bad. But let's talk a little bit more about that. So one way you can do this really is to get the whole family involved, whether it's your spouse, your older kids, or maybe you have a friend that wants to come over and help you. Meal prep can be a really fun group activity, and everyone gets to enjoy the results. The key here is to cook more than you need. Like I mentioned earlier, leftovers are your friend. You can also use them for easy lunches, which is something my husband does. He typically eats our leftovers for lunches, and you can even repurpose those into a whole new meal. To make meal prep even easier, pair with something else that you like to do. Like maybe you can catch up on a podcast episode, or watch a movie, or enjoy your morning coffee. I like to throw on an audiobook and then have a cup of coffee or something like that. Or a hot cup of tea, or something that just makes it really fun and makes it something that kind of breaks up the monotony of the activity. And again, this could be including your family. I know my kids love to cook in the kitchen, and it's something I really want to try to focus on bringing them into the kitchen more with me as they are getting older. But doing an audiobook, listening to music, listening to a podcast, all of those things can just make it seem like something that you can look forward to, especially if you choose something that you don't necessarily do all the time anyway, or that you really enjoy. It can kind of break up that feeling of dread that we might feel when we think that we're going to have to spend a little bit of extra time in the kitchen. You can also start with the quick prep task like hard-boiling eggs, chopping up vegetables, or soaking beans. Then consider cooking larger batches or more time-intensive meals like stews, casseroles, and then grains, which I typically like to throw. We don't really do a ton of grains, but I will throw rice in the Instapot and make up a giant batch, and then I will freeze it and throw it in bags in the freezer. And then also beans, you can throw those into an Instapot, and you could freeze them as well, or you could can them. I typically will can them if I don't just buy them in a canned store-bought. So freeze those extras or keep them in the fridge for later so that you've got nutritious, home-cooked meals on hand whenever you need them. It really is all about making time work for you and getting the most out of every meal. And again, if you've ever heard, if it's something that freezes well, make an extra, double the recipe, throw half of it in the freezer, and then you have that quickly ready to go. My preferred way is actually to make one select ingredient in bulk. For instance, I will brown up a ton of ground beef in our Instapot, and then I will just freeze it in the amount I would need for a meal. I do the same like I mentioned with rice. You could do this with beans. I've canned up a bunch of beans before in our pressure canner to have those on the shelf and ready to go. I just tend to if I'm already going to be making something, for instance, if I need some rice for a recipe, I'm just going to make a giant batch and then throw some in the freezer, and then I have it ready for a quick meal, which again is going to help me resist that urge to try to go get takeout when I know I have quick ingredients ready to go in the freezer. Okay, so that is going to be all for this episode. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about more practical ways to eat healthy on a budget. And I would love to hear from you. If you have some tips that you would love to share with us, come join us over in our Facebook group. You can find it at bit.ly/motherhoodcommunity, or you can share with me in an email. Come and message me either on Facebook or Instagram. Either way, I hope to hear from you. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you back next time.
Hey Mama, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who is wanting to live more holistically without the overwhelm? Also, don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts to leave me a review. It blesses and encourages me to know that this show is helping you. All right, friends, it's time for me to go work in the garden and make some homemade bone broth. I will see you back next week.